In the pre-dawn darkness of August 29th, 1949, something catastrophic ripped through the desolate steppes of Kazakhstan. It was not a natural disaster. It was a man-made sun, blazing with the fury of 22 kilotons of TNT, momentarily turning night into blinding day. This was the first Soviet atomic bomb test, codenamed First Lightning or Joe 1 by the Americans. For Washington, D.C., the news was a seismic shock. President Harry Truman, informed of radioactive fallout detected across the Pacific, faced a terrifying reality. The United States' atomic monopoly, the bedrock of its post-war power and a fragile shield against Soviet expansion, was shattered years ahead of all Western predictions. The world was now locked in a terrifying nuclear standoff. But the question that haunted every intelligence agency, every politician, every scientist was not if the Soviets would build a bomb, but how they had done it so fast. The official estimates had granted the Soviet Union at least 5, perhaps even 10, more years to develop their own weapon. Yet, here it was. The only logical conclusion, chilling in its implications, was that vital secrets had been stolen. Somewhere, buried within the monumental effort to create the atom bomb, there had been a leak, a betrayal of unimaginable magnitude. The race was on to find the spy who had delivered the blueprints for global annihilation. This is the story of that spy. A story not of a daring commando or a hardened espionage operative, but of a quiet, intensely brilliant physicist named Klaus Fuchs. A man whose journey took him from Nazi Germany to the heart of the Manhattan Project, driven by a complex ideology and a profound, yet ultimately disastrous, misconception about the path to global peace. His actions would accelerate the nuclear arms race, irrevocably shape the Cold War, and leave a shadow of suspicion over scientific cooperation for decades to come. The central question that demands an answer is this: how did one unassuming scientist, working at the very pinnacle of wartime secrecy, manage to hand the Soviet Union the keys to the atomic kingdom? Our story begins in 1911. In Rüsselsheim, Germany, Emil Julius Klaus Fuchs was the third of 4 children born to a Lutheran pastor, Emil Fuchs. A man of profound social conscience and pacifist convictions, his mother, Else Wagner Fuchs, battled mental illness and ultimately took her own life. This early exposure to both intellectual rigor and personal tragedy shaped the young Klaus. He grew up in an atmosphere of political ferment, witnessing the collapse of the German Empire, the turmoil of the Weimar Republic, and the terrifying rise of Nazism. Klaus, a gifted student, pursued physics and mathematics at the universities of Leipzig and Kiel. But the lecture halls were not immune to the political storms raging outside. The early 1930s saw the Nazi Party consolidate its power, persecuting political opponents and Jews. Fuchs, like his father, was a committed anti-Nazi. He joined the Social Democratic Party of Germany in 1930, but quickly became disillusioned with its perceived inaction against the Nazis. He moved further left, joining the Communist Party of Germany in 1932. This was not a casual affiliation. It was a deeply held conviction rooted in his belief that communism offered the only viable path to social justice and resistance against fascism. The consequences of this decision were swift and brutal. In 1933, as Hitler ascended to the chancellorship, political dissent became a death sentence. Fuchs, a known communist activist, found himself a hunted man. He was attacked by Nazi thugs, surviving a near-fatal beating. With his life in imminent danger, he made the agonizing decision to flee Germany, seeking refuge in Great Britain. This exile marked a pivotal moment. He left behind a shattered homeland, but carried with him a potent blend of intellectual brilliance, deep-seated political conviction, and a profound mistrust of established power structures. He was a refugee, but also a man with a cause. In Britain, Fuchs found a new home and continued his academic pursuits, earning his PhD in physics from the University of Bristol in 1937, followed by a DSc from the University of Edinburgh in 1939. His mentors like Professor Neville Mott and Professor Max Born recognized his extraordinary talents. He was not merely intelligent, he possessed an uncanny ability to grasp complex mathematical and theoretical concepts with astonishing speed and clarity. He became a respected figure in the rarefied world of theoretical physics, often described as quiet, reserved, almost self-effacing. Yet beneath this unassuming exterior lay a resolute will and an unwavering commitment to his political ideals. When World War II erupted in September 1939, Fuchs, as a German national, was deemed an enemy alien by the British government. In 1940, he was interned first on the Isle of Man and then in a camp in Quebec, Canada. This experience, though harsh, was temporary. His scientific talent was too valuable to be wasted. Max Born, his former professor, intervened, vouching for Fuchs's loyalty and indispensable skills. By 1941, Fuchs was back in Britain, granted parole, and offered a position on a secret project that would change the course of history, the British atomic bomb program, codenamed Tube Alloys. The Tube Alloys project was a small but brilliant group of scientists, wrestling with the monumental challenge of harnessing nuclear fission. They worked in laboratories across the UK, meticulously calculating the critical mass of uranium, designing separation methods, and exploring the theoretical implications of an atomic chain reaction. Fuchs was quickly recognized as one of their brightest stars. His expertise in theoretical physics, particularly in statistical mechanics and nuclear theory, proved invaluable. He became privy to the most sensitive secrets of the British atomic effort, trusted implicitly by his colleagues. It was during this period, in late 1941 or early 1942, that Klaus Fuchs made a decision that would reverberate for decades. He made contact with the Soviet intelligence services. His motivation was not financial gain, nor was it personal vengeance. He genuinely believed that the Western Allies, particularly the United States and Great Britain, would attempt to monopolize atomic power after the war, using it as a tool for political domination against the Soviet Union. He envisioned a post-war world where nuclear weapons in the hands of a single bloc would inevitably lead to conflict and instability. For Fuchs, sharing the secrets with the Soviets was an act of ideological necessity, a way to prevent one power from holding the ultimate trump card. He believed that only a balance of power, a nuclear stalemate, could ensure lasting peace and prevent the rise of a new global hegemon. This was his great contradiction: to pursue peace by enabling an arms race. His initial contacts were rudimentary, often arranged through Communist Party channels that had survived the war's beginning. He met with a Soviet agent, Ursula Kuczynski, codenamed Sonia, who was based in Oxfordshire. Sonia was an experienced operative, adept at clandestine meetings and handling sources. Fuchs began passing information, theoretical papers, and research findings from the British program. These early exchanges were significant, but they were merely a prelude to the main act. The scale of his betrayal and its global impact would only truly begin when the British and American atomic programs merged. In August 1943, following the Quebec Agreement, the United States, Great Britain, and Canada officially pooled their atomic research efforts under the umbrella of the Manhattan Project. This colossal undertaking, unparalleled in human history, aimed to build an atomic bomb before Nazi Germany. Fuchs, by virtue of his invaluable expertise, was transferred to the United States. His destination was the clandestine city of Los Alamos, New Mexico, a remote plateau where the best scientific minds of the Allied powers had been assembled in absolute secrecy. This isolated scientific city, built from scratch in the high desert, was a fortress of intellect and classified knowledge, protected by layers of military security. The irony of a dedicated communist, a German refugee, being entrusted with the deepest secrets of the capitalist West was lost on everyone at the time. Fuchs arrived at Los Alamos in December 1943. He joined the theoretical division, led by the brilliant, enigmatic Hungarian-American physicist Hans Bethe, Fuchs's work involved complex calculations crucial to the implosion design of the plutonium bomb, known as the Fat Man bomb. He worked on hydrodynamics, the physics of how explosive lenses would compress a sphere of plutonium to critical density. This was not peripheral work. It was at the very core of the weapon's design, demanding an almost intuitive understanding of nuclear physics and high explosives. He was one of the few individuals who truly understood the entire mechanism of the implosion device. At Los Alamos, Fuchs was not just an observer, he was a key contributor. He collaborated closely with some of the most prominent scientists of the era, including Bethe, John von Neumann, and Richard Feynman. They trusted him implicitly. He was diligent, quiet, and seemingly absorbed only in his work. No one suspected the double life he was leading. His espionage routine at Los Alamos was meticulously organized. He would attend the highly secret technical lectures, absorb every detail, and participate in discussions. Then, he would meticulously commit vast amounts of information to memory, or meticulously copy diagrams and equations onto small sheets of paper. He had an eidetic memory, a physicist's ability to recall complex formulas and intricate designs. Every month or two, he would travel to Santa Fe, the nearest major town, for pre-arranged meetings with his Soviet handlers. These meetings were often held in remote, pre-designated locations, a quiet roadside, a deserted park bench. He would pass over his notes, sometimes microfilmed, sometimes simply written on tissue paper, detailing everything from the properties of uranium-2, 3, 5, and plutonium-2, 3, 9 to the design of the implosion lens, the dimensions of the initiator, and the critical mass calculations. The information Fuchs provided was staggering in its scope and detail. He revealed the exact components and dimensions of the Fat Man implosion device, including the complex design of the high explosive lenses, the tamper materials, and the neutron initiator. He provided data on the quantity of fissile material required, the efficiency of the weapon, and the expected yield. He even shared insights into the theoretical challenges being faced, allowing Soviet scientists to avoid blind alleys and focus their efforts on proven paths. This wasn't merely accelerating a program, it was a blueprint. The strategic dilemma for the American leadership, embodied by General Leslie Groves, the military head of the Manhattan Project, was immense. They were racing against time, convinced that Nazi Germany was also developing a nuclear weapon. Security had to be tight, but the project also depended on the free flow of scientific ideas among a large group of brilliant, often eccentric, individuals. The very nature of scientific collaboration, where ideas are shared and debated, made it a challenge to enforce absolute compartmentalization. Fuchs exploited this open environment, hidden in plain sight. As the war neared its end, the climax of the Manhattan Project approached. On July 16, 1945, at the desolate Granada del Muerto desert in New Mexico, the world witnessed the first detonation of a nuclear weapon, the Trinity test. The device, a plutonium implosion bomb, vaporized its steel tower, seared the desert floor into a glass-like crust, and sent a mushroom cloud rising more than 38,000 feet into the atmosphere. The scientists and military observers, some watching from miles away, were gripped by a mixture of awe and terror. J. Robert Oppenheimer, the scientific director of Los Alamos, famously recalled the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Klaus Fuchs was there. He witnessed the Trinity test firsthand. And almost immediately, he delivered a detailed report of the test, including its precise yield and the specific components used, to his Soviet handlers. This information was invaluable. It confirmed that the implosion design worked, provided real-world performance data, and removed any lingering doubts about the feasibility of such a weapon. Just weeks later, on August 6th and August 9th, 1945, atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The world reeled from the destructive power of these new weapons. Imperial Japan surrendered, bringing World War II to a swift, brutal close. The nuclear age had begun, and the United States held a terrifying, solitary advantage. Or so it seemed. After the war, Fuchs returned to Great Britain in 1946, joining the Atomic Energy Research Establishment at Harwell, Oxfordshire. This was the UK's premier nuclear research facility, and Fuchs was appointed head of the Theoretical Physics Division. His work was now focused on the next generation of nuclear weapons, including early concepts for the hydrogen bomb. He continued his espionage, maintaining contact with Soviet intelligence, passing on details about British nuclear efforts, and crucially, new insights into thermonuclear weapon designs. He was now providing a strategic roadmap for the development of both fission and fusion weapons. The immediate post-war period was dominated by the burgeoning Cold War. The United States believed it had a comfortable lead in the atomic race, an atomic monopoly that was supposed to last for years. The Joint Chiefs of Staff and political leaders formulated strategies based on this perceived advantage. Meanwhile, across the Iron Curtain, Joseph Stalin, keenly aware of the bomb's power, had ordered his scientists to build a Soviet atom bomb as quickly as possible. His chief of secret police, Lavrenti Beria, oversaw the project with ruthless efficiency, constantly pressing for faster results. The intelligence Fuchs provided was a godsend for the Soviet effort, validating designs, eliminating false starts, and providing critical data on bomb yields. It was the ultimate cheat sheet. The strategic consequences were immense. Fuchs's actions, combined with intelligence from other, lesser-known sources, undoubtedly shortened the timeline for the Soviet Union's atomic bomb. Instead of potentially 5 to 10 more years, they achieved it in just 4. This dramatically accelerated the nuclear arms race, ensuring that the United States would not have a prolonged period of unchallenged nuclear supremacy. The world moved from a phase of American atomic monopoly to a precarious balance of terror far sooner than anyone in the West anticipated. The fear of Soviet aggression, now coupled with the fear of atomic retaliation, became the defining characteristic of the Cold War. But the web of deceit was slowly beginning to unravel. The first threads of suspicion emerged not from a direct lead, but from the painstaking, highly secret work of codebreakers. The Venona Project, a joint Anglo-American effort, had been intercepting and decrypting Soviet intelligence communications since 1943. These messages, encrypted using a one-time pad system that was supposed to be unbreakable, had contained a fatal flaw. Some pads were reused. This allowed intelligence analysts to slowly, painstakingly, piece together fragments of conversations between Moscow and its agents abroad. By 1949, the Venona decrypts began to yield tantalizing but incomplete clues. There were references to an atomic spy, a physicist codenamed Charles, who had worked at Los Alamos and provided extremely sensitive information. The intercepts mentioned travel plans, scientific details, and even a unique turn of phrase. The British Security Service, Michigan 5, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, joined forces in a desperate effort to identify Charles. It was a colossal intelligence puzzle, sifting through thousands of personnel files, cross-referencing locations, dates, and scientific backgrounds. The search eventually narrowed. One name kept resurfacing: Klaus Fuchs. His unusual background as a German refugee, his communist past, his access to top-secret information both in the UK and US, and even his characteristic quiet demeanor seemed to fit the profile. But suspicion was not proof, and the intelligence agencies knew they needed concrete evidence. In late 1949, Michigan 5 assigned William Scarden, a highly skilled and patient interrogator, to the Fuchs case. Scarden was known for his calm, methodical approach, his ability to build rapport and gently chip away at a suspect's composure. He began a series of seemingly informal conversations with Fuchs at Harwell, ostensibly about general security matters. These interviews stretched over weeks, with Scarden meticulously probing, asking seemingly innocuous questions, and observing Fuchs's reactions. Fuchs, outwardly calm and professional, initially denied everything. He was a master of self-control, but Scarden detected subtle shifts, a certain tension, a quiet defensiveness in the physicist's responses. He subtly presented Fuchs with circumstantial evidence gleaned from the Venona decrypts, without revealing the source. He spoke of the psychological burden of secrets, the moral complexities of loyalty, and the possibility of redemption through confession. Scarden didn't accuse, he merely reflected. The psychological pressure eventually became unbearable. Klaus Fuchs, the quiet scientist who had held the weight of the atomic age in his memory, finally broke. On January 27, 1950, in a small office at Harwell, he confessed. The scene must have been extraordinary. Fuchs, a man whose mind could dissect the deepest mysteries of the universe, sat across from Scarden and calmly detailed his decade-long espionage. He admitted to passing atomic secrets to the Soviet Union since 1942. He recounted his meetings, the types of information he transmitted, and his motivations. His confession was precise, scientific in its detail, and utterly devastating. He explained his ideological conviction that nuclear power should not be monopolized, that only a balance of power could ensure peace. He also admitted to a growing personal unease, a sense of living a lie that had become increasingly corrosive. He described his actions as compartmentalized. A part of him was a loyal, brilliant scientist. Another part was a committed, ideological agent. The internal contradiction had finally fractured him. The revelation sent shockwaves through the highest levels of government in both Britain and the United States. It was the moment that fear of nuclear espionage transitioned from a theoretical concern to a horrifying reality. Here was undeniable proof that the Soviets had not merely caught up, but had done so with direct, critical assistance from within the Western scientific community. Fuchs was arrested and charged under the Official Secrets Act. His trial in London began on March 1, 1950. The legal process in Britain was less focused on the political motivations or the specific details of the atomic secrets, and more on the straightforward charge of passing classified information to a foreign power. Fuchs pleaded guilty. In court, his defense barrister emphasized Fuchs's deep-seated anti-Nazi convictions and his belief that a balance of power would prevent future wars. Despite his cooperation with the authorities and his detailed confession, the crime was of unprecedented gravity. On March 1, 1950, Klaus Fuchs was sentenced to 14 years in prison. This was the maximum sentence for espionage under British law at the time. The relatively short sentence by modern standards for such a crime underscored the limitations of the legal framework in dealing with an act of such immense strategic consequence. For the American government, the sentence felt outrageously lenient, a further source of frustration and anger. The immediate consequences of Fuchs's conviction were profound. It triggered a massive counterintelligence operation in the West, a frantic search for other atomic spies. This led directly to the exposure of other members of the Soviet atomic spy network, including Harry Gold, who had been Fuchs's courier in the United States, and later, David Greenglass and Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, whose cases became iconic symbols of Cold War espionage and paranoia. Fuchs's confession provided the crucial links that allowed intelligence agencies to trace the entire chain of betrayal. The damage Fuchs inflicted was immense. He provided the Soviets with a complete technical understanding of the implosion-type atomic bomb, effectively removing years from the research and development timeline. This didn't just save time, it saved vast resources, allowing the Soviets to focus their efforts more efficiently. His detailed knowledge of the critical mass, the physics of implosion, the initiator, and other key components meant that Soviet scientists could proceed with confidence, knowing their designs were fundamentally sound. This technological shortcut directly led to the accelerated development of the Soviet atomic bomb and subsequently, their early work on the hydrogen bomb. The strategic impact was the creation of a global nuclear standoff far sooner than anticipated. The balance of terror that Fuchs had ironically sought to achieve through his espionage became a chilling reality. The world entered an era defined by mutually assured destruction, where the threat of nuclear annihilation hung over every international crisis. The illusion of American atomic superiority was shattered, replaced by an urgent, dangerous arms race that defined the next 4 decades. Beyond the immediate strategic consequences, Fuchs's betrayal had a corrosive effect on trust within the scientific community and between allied nations. It fueled suspicion, led to tighter security protocols, and made international scientific collaboration, especially on sensitive projects, infinitely more difficult. The image of the independent, ethically driven scientist was tarnished by the knowledge that one of their own had been a deep cover agent. Klaus Fuchs served 9 years and 4 months of his sentence, released early for good behavior. Upon his release in 1959, he was stripped of his British citizenship and immediately deported to East Germany. There, he was embraced as a hero by the communist regime, honored for his service to the socialist cause. He resumed his scientific career, becoming deputy director of the Institute for Nuclear Research in Rossendorf, Dresden, where he continued to work on nuclear physics. He married a former Communist Party colleague, Grete Kielsen, and lived a relatively quiet life, though always under the watchful eye of the East German state and the KGB. He never expressed regret for his actions, maintaining until his death in 1988 that he had done what he believed was right for peace and the future of humanity. The story of Klaus Fuchs is a profound historical irony, driven by a deep-seated communist conviction and a genuine, if utterly misguided, belief that sharing atomic secrets would create a stable, peaceful world through a balance of power. He instead played a pivotal role in accelerating the most dangerous arms race in history. He hoped to prevent a monopoly and foster peace, but instead helped establish a terrifying Cold War standoff. His actions removed the strategic cushion of time that the West might have used to develop alternative security arrangements, forcing the world into an immediate, high-stakes nuclear confrontation. Fuchs was not a common spy. He was a man of immense intellect, whose personal history and ideological commitments led him to a path of profound betrayal. His story illuminates the complex interplay of science, politics, and personal conviction during one of humanity's most critical junctures. It reveals the immense power of secrets, the fragility of trusts, and the often unforeseen consequences of individual decisions on the global stage. The quiet physicist, through his clandestine work in remote New Mexico and rural England, helped usher in a new, terrifying age, an age defined by the ultimate weapon he had helped build and then profoundly helped share. His legacy is a stark reminder that in the shadow of the atomic bomb, the lines between hero and traitor, idealism and destructive folly can become terrifyingly blurred, leaving the world forever altered by the spy who stole the atomic bomb.